Welcome to Stone Hard Sports, the very first YouTube video for Stone Hard Sports, at least with face cam. We are going to be doing a mock draft today. If you don't know, you're new to this channel, normally I have a podcast. You can go find it wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. I'm doing it for about a year, and I'm still going to be doing a lot of stuff over there, but I wanted to at least try out some, YouTube videos with Facecam so you guys can at least see what's going on. And in this one, we're going to be doing a mock draft, the first mock draft actually for Stone Hard Sports. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get right into it. I will say before we get into it, if you haven't already and you don't know, the last episode I did, I went over quarterbacks. It was pretty in-depth, at least specifically with the draft quarterbacks. Haven't really gone in-depth to any other position, but that episode focused a lot on the quarterbacks coming into the NFL draft and my opinions on them. This is, a mock draft, partly of what I slightly would do, but also more so like, hey, what are these teams going to do? So that's going to be what it's based on. And if you don't know me, I am in the camp of, hey, Bears, take Caleb Williams number one. Don't go ahead and keep Justin Fields and trade the first pick. So we will be taking Caleb Williams with the number one overall pick. It's just a pick that makes the most sense. It makes the most sense. You get to restart on the quarterback clock. Justin Fields will need to be paid next year. He is not as good, just straight up, as people say he is. His, obviously running ability is phenomenal. As a passer, he's just not very refined. Now, Caleb is obviously, some people don't like him because of his antics and a lot of the other stuff that he does. I think some of it is overblown, but what he is the most talented quarterback that we've seen in a long time, and he's a guaranteed franchise quarterback. And when I say that, and when people bring up comparisons of Patrick Mahomes, it's not saying he's going to be the next Mahomes, but the play style is very similar. When we say Mahomes, we were talking about the play style, not he's going to win exactly this many MVPs, this many titles, blah, blah, blah. He's going to be a guaranteed franchise quarterback, and whatever happens in terms of his grand pantheon of where is he ranked depends on partly his situation, and a lot of it, of how he carries himself and goes about, hey, what's around him? What did he have? All that good stuff. Which, if you, get him controlled, because the biggest thing I think with Caleb Williams is he's not, he's very loose and he can make a ton of insane, crazy plays, but then also sometimes it's like, hey, let's reel it back in. What are you doing? If he can have a coaching staff that can control him to a good, ideally, not just insane amount of control, but an ideal control, he can reach the Patrick Mahomes level. But that just needs to, happen. But he's not going to be a bust. I'm telling you. I'm sorry. If you think he's going to be a bust and Justin Fields is the better way to go, you're wrong. I apologize. That's just not the case. And another opinion that's thrown out there is around the next quarterback that will be drafted to the Washington Commanders, and that's Drake May. And I also think he is the second best quarterback in this class. And I think a lot of the narratives thrown about him are pretty insane. The fact that he went to the same school as another player who also went really high and also played quarterback and was not good means that Drake May is not going to be good. Just very casual takes from people who aren't very educated about having any sort of analysis about NFL or football players. This is another franchise quarterback. He is the ideal franchise quarterback you think of. Reminds me a ton of Justin Herbert. Great size, make all the throws. He's relatively mobile as well. Obviously, his play declined. Both of these guys' plays declined. I think Drake Mays was a little bit more due to what was around him. I mean, he lost all of his weapons he had from last year, and the best weapon he had was Tez Walker, and Tez Walker at receiver was horrible at the Senior Bowl, did very bad. I'm not sure how he'll be as an NFL prospect. So there wasn't a ton going on for Drake May. He also was cramped in the pocket a ton, had to either escape or try and step up, got sacked a good amount of times, avoided a lot of sacks, just a lot of stuff that went wrong. There were some throws where it was like, hey, you could have done this, instead of doing this. But again, it's coachable. It's not like, hey, don't take him. I just cannot believe that at all. But he is a very, 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 very good franchise quarterback. One of the better prospects we've seen in the last 10 years. Would be the first overall pick last year for sure. Don't question it. Don't think too much. It is this pick. And the next one is also going to be a quarterback, and one that I do agree with as well, and I think is very good. I don't think he's on the same tier as May or Williams, but is very good. Jayden Daniels. They need a quarterback. Just got rid of Mac Jones. By the way, this video is being filmed after slightly free agency, so the first about 2 or 3 days have gone by. A good majority of the moves have happened. Still some left to be done, but not a ton that are going to fully change a lot of the picks. But back to number 3, Jayden Daniels. He had the best season of any quarterback last year. No, like straight up. He won the Heisman, well deserved, absolutely. And he can do a lot of good. He's pretty tall for a quarterback, at least ideally, what you would want. Not like Drake May size, but he is taller than Caleb Williams. It's just the reason he's not on the same tier, even though his numbers are amazing. He makes a lot of great throws, deep, medium, short. He is relatively slender, and he plays like he's Cam Newton. And he's not Cam Newton. And by that I mean super aggressive runner, takes a ton of hits. And that's why he's not going as high. Also, because it's just 1 year of production. If it was more than 1 year, then he would definitely be up there. But as a transfer, this is his first year of doing very good with, keep in mind, 2 of the best weapons, arguably, in college football, at least on the same team, the best duo, both of which are going to be first-round picks that we're going to mock in this mock draft. So a lot of help. Now, is that a guarantee that he's going to be good or bad? No. We've seen guys with a lot of help do amazing in the NFL and not so good. It's not a determining factor, but you do have to take it into account when you're comparing him against other quarterbacks. And the injury possibility is very much there. He is a little bit skinnier and acts like he's not, and it could cause for a lot of hits. So he just needs to stay very contained, and it's going to be a big switch because out of these 3 teams, that are picking quarterbacks in the top 3, I would say the Patriots might be the worst situation. Now, Chicago obviously can have that, as like, hey, we're also bad. And Washington, I mean, Sam Howell took 1 million sacks last year. Part was his fault, but part obviously was the O-line. But in terms of what these teams have been doing in the draft and free agency with the Bears and, they making a lot of trades, and Washington spending a ton of money. New England did bring back a lot of good pieces, which is nice, and they got rid of the bad ones, but it's still not this like roster that you're like, okay, I'm super confident this player is going to succeed. I would hope in the next year or two they would at least maybe hit on some later picks in terms of some skills positions, and hopefully don't ruin his career. But could he reach a place where he's better than both May and Williams? Yes, absolutely. It's just the floor is a little bit lower, injury history and just concern is a little bit higher. And I think the ceiling of Williams and May are higher than Daniels, but it's very possible he could jump them, absolutely. It's just when you're ranking quarterback prospects, you got to take all that stuff into account. And then at number 4, I think the top 4 picks are pretty solidified. It's Marvin Harrison Jr., pretty easy, best receiver in the class, phenomenal, stud, amazing. They're going to look at him just like they did Larry Fitzgerald, a legend in Arizona if he stays there his whole career. Not a ton to say, just a phenomenal player and pick. Going to go Marvin Harrison Jr. there for Arizona. And now with the Chargers, I think it is 2 positions. It is either Joe Alt or just a tackle in general, or it is a receiver, as they did just get rid of Mike Williams, as they had to cut him to get under the cap. But there is a team out there that likes a certain quarterback that a lot of NFL GMs and teams like a lot more than the public does. And they are going to be making a move and trading up. And that is the Minnesota Vikings. They are going to be trading up with the Los Angeles Chargers for the 5th overall pick. They're probably going to have to give up a first. It'll just look something like that. If they don't, maybe 2 seconds, but I definitely think it's a first. A lot of the PFF thing may say it's not going to go through, but they don't value like, hey, if you're trading up for a quarterback and they know you're trading it for a quarterback, you're not just going to get the regular deal. They might have to throw in another 3 or something like that. Let's say like a 3 next year or something, and hey, you're like, hey, give us a 5th or a 6th next year or something like that. But that, not trying to get into specifics of the trade, but that's around what it'll be. And they're going to have to get a quarterback, and it's going to be J.J. McCarthy. Now, the thing on J.J. McCarthy, his opinion amongst, NFL circles is much higher than it is everyone else. But I think he is the toughest quarterback in this class to evaluate. He's very, very young, so still has a ton of room to grow. And he played in a team, yes, that they had the best team in college football. And he didn't have to throw a ton. But according to, NFL scouts and GMs, they value, obviously, his, ability to just win, made a lot of clutch throws. He's specifically, probably the biggest one, worked in an NFL-style offense under Jim Harbaugh, which a lot of guys maybe come in, they take at least a year or two to actually learn, okay, this is all the stuff I need to do in the NFL. And JJ has had experience with that already. He's had some games where he hasn't been great against very low competition. And obviously you're going to say, hey, the team around him's been great. But it's kind of the idea of like, was he not required to throw as much because they just didn't need him to? And when he did need to, he made plays? Or is it, hey, they purposely ran the ball so that they knew, like, hey, we can't rely on him all the time, so we're going to do this, and instead of having him throw? You can't really say. And it's a very risky pick, but I think he can definitely be like a very good Pro Bowl caliber quarterback, one that you could go to the Super Bowl with. I know everyone's trying to find that line of, hey, can we go to the Super Bowl with this guy, or is it not even possible? I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo's been to one. Nick Foles has won one. We've had a lot of other quarterbacks that have won or have been to the game. A good amount of it is based on your team. The quarterback, I think, just makes it to where you're in the hunt even more. But I think McCarthy is a very viable quarterback, but I would prefer if he sat a year. I think that'd be the best situation if he sat one entire year, maybe played the last 3 games or 4 games or something. Minnesota did just sign Sam Darnold, so hey, maybe try a Sam Darnold redemption tour. Could work out in Minnesota, but maybe that could cause some issues with Justin Jefferson. Maybe going with a year of, Kirk being injured and then Sam Darnold, he's like, okay, I'm done. I don't want to play with a rookie, that might cause some issues. But the reason they're having to trade up is because a lot of things have been circulating and saying that maybe he is a top 10 pick. And, he could go to a team maybe that trades up with the Falcons or Bears or Jets. Maybe a team trades with those teams to try and jump the Vikings. But also the Giants could also just straight up take him at 6. It's very possible. So in this mock, he is going to go very high and being picked 5th overall. Now, is he worth the pick? No, but again, quarterback, very valuable position. And that's just what happens when you try and get a quarterback. So Vikings get their hopeful QB of the future at 5. And then the New York Giants, they're like, okay, that's fine. We'll just get the best receiver on the board. Malik Neighbors, pure playmaker. That's what they need. They really don't have a lot of that in town right now. And they just need someone who is going to go out there and dominate. And that's Malik Neighbors. Give him the ball, let him do his thing. Just like Odell back in the day. Hey, go save us. Throw it up. Catch it with 3 fingers. Do something. Please help us. That's what Neighbors is going to come and do for the Giants. And then the Titans at 7. I'm going to have them go with the best offensive tackle in the draft, and that is Joe Alt. Just prototypical franchise left tackle, exactly what you want. They just made a ton of moves in free agency. As I'm recording this, literally 5 minutes ago, they just signed Calvin Ridley to a big deal. So they got their receivers. This could have been a pick, a receiver, maybe a Rome Odunze, but no, it's 100% going to be a tackle now, and I really like that for Tennessee. And they're doing a pretty good job, at least it seems like, building around a quarterback in Will Levis, who they took in the 2nd round, and it looks like phenomenal value. He looks like, hey, this guy might have some potential, and I'd give him another 2 years to see what he can do. So good on the Titans. They're actually potentially building something to try and compete in the future with the 3 teams in their division. Maybe it doesn't happen the first year, but maybe after that they could get something going. The Falcons just obviously signed big name quarterback Kirk Cousins, and they have a ton of offensive weapons, and just they do not need to be drafting offense in the first round this year. Go ahead, get the best pure. This not. I don't think he could be the best, but I'd say just get the safest defensive player and the safest just pass rusher. Safest pass rusher in the draft, and that's Dallas Turner. He is just guaranteed to come out and he's going to play well. Will he maybe reach the heights of other players in this draft? We don't really know, but he's the safest, definitely worth picking in the top 10, and I think it's very good for Atlanta. They just signed Kirk. They're not trying to take risks with all these, other guys. Just get good players. We're trying to win the division. I think it's very possible that they could take over the Bucks. I think it's likely that they will. And if you're in the playoffs, anything can happen. The Bucks. It's the start of the year. I didn't think they'd be winning a playoff game, and they won a playoff game and almost won another. Which if you're in the NFC title game and you win, boom, Super Bowl. And if you're in the Super Bowl, anything can happen. So I know it's a weird climb there, but I'm not saying that they're going to get to the Super Bowl, but it's the division's wide open, and it's. If you get a guaranteed playoff spot, anything can happen in the playoffs. So just get the safest guy, Dallas Turner. Need more pass rushing and sack production on the team. Then going to the Bears, Rome Odunze, best receiver left on the board. Out of the big three, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, and Rome Odunze. He's a little bit different than Nabers, a little bit bigger. Some people don't like him just because they think he's just a big jump ball receiver like Quentin Johnston. Could not be farther from the truth. I was not a big fan of Quentin Johnston coming out. I did a lot of my draft stuff last year. That was a receiver I was not as big or as high on, but I'm very high on Odunze, and he's not the same player. He's faster, better route runner, better hands, can do a lot more than Quentin Johnston. So this is an awesome piece next to DJ Moore, and the Bears just got their quarterback some very nice weapons going into next year. Then the Jets, they just recently traded for Morgan Moses. Very good trade. They need, even though he's older, they need tackle. And that's also what we're going to do with this pick, because they need tackle on the other side. Because the biggest thing they need to do is keep their quarterback that they just traded for and signed, a ton of money to and pretty much invested everything in, because they can't, draft and develop a quarterback. He needs to play more than half a drive. So get the next best tackle on the board. Talisi Fuaga, very, very good. He rivals Joe Alt as the best tackle in the class. Just can move inside, outside, very good versus quick edge rushers. Love the pick. They need tackle for sure. Go ahead and target that. And there's a ton of tackles in this class. This class is very deep with tackle, receiver, and corners. Those three positions you're going to see going in this first round a ton, because there's a lot of talent there. Then the Chargers at 11, they move back. They could go a number of different positions, like we said. I think they should take a player that is, I would say, a top 5 player in the class that would have been worthy at 5. Some people would have questioned the value, but I think is definitely worthy at 11, and that's Brock Bowers. Just lost Mike Williams, and you're saying, well, Brock Bowers is a tight end. He's not a receiver. Brock Bowers is a weapon. He's not a tight end. He can play tight end. He can also play slot receiver. He is just a move-around, pure, amazing weapon tight end. Going to be a top 5 tight end in the NFL, maybe even top 3. Love this pick and player. He's going to be phenomenal. So Chargers definitely get the upgrade there and give Herbert and that offense more weapons and firepower. Then the Broncos. Broncos are in an interesting spot. They paid a ton of money to get rid of Russell Wilson. They did not really want him in the building. So there is a hole at quarterback. They didn't go out and get Kirk Cousins or trade for Justin Fields. So we are going to go ahead and give them Bo Nix. Again, similar to J.J. McCarthy. Is he the 12th best player in the class? No. But quarterback is a very valuable position. And in terms of Bo Nix, not saying that he is going to be this player, but again, when you're talking about similarities in terms of play style and traits, he's almost like a lesser, obviously, Drew Brees, but reminds me a good amount of Brock Purdy. He's not the biggest guy, doesn't have the biggest arm, but is pretty much one of the best short ball throwers in the NFL, amazing in play action. And I think when you just think about Sean Payton and all the success he had in New Orleans, Bo Nix can do a ton of that. At Oregon, he was in contention for the Heisman. Obviously, had a good amount of players around him, but he's not very stiff. Like Purdy's pretty mobile, and so is Bo Nix. He could get some red zone touchdowns, kind of like Jalen Hurts, except not just tush push into the end zone, like actually running off of a play action and going into the end zone. Pretty big red zone threat. And he is an older prospect, but the Broncos, they're in a weird spot. We don't really know if they're rebuilding. They don't have as high of a pick. Maybe they'll be lower next year. But I think you're like, hey, he's a first round caliber quarterback. Why not go ahead and take him? You need him. If you trade down, someone is probably going to go up and get him because quarterback is a very valuable position. I don't think going into next year with Jarrett Stidham is a very good idea as just your pure starter. They've already made the decision to get rid of all these other quarterbacks. Why not go ahead and get Bo Nix? I don't hate it, to be honest. And he's worked with a lot of quarterbacks like that. Then at 13, the Raiders spent a lot of money in free agency, did some big stuff. Obviously, Christian Wilkins, cornerback, I think is still a need. I think they should get the best corner on the board, the best corner I think in the draft, and that's Quinion Mitchell. I think he's just one of the best players in the draft in general. Just pretty much everything that you want in a cornerback. Perfect blend of production and athleticism. He dominated at the Senior Bowl, dominated at the Combine, dominated on the field. Great ball skills. My favorite corner in the class. I think this is an awesome pick for Las Vegas. Then at 14, Saints in an interesting position. Just been mid for so long at least since Sean Payton has left and Drew Brees, which I guess wasn't too long ago, but the past, 3 years hasn't really been a ton going on. And they could look at defensive line or tackle. It's tough because they drafted Brian Brzee a year ago, and they also drafted Trevor Penning, who's their other tackle 2 years ago. But I'm going to go with Byron Murphy. Very, very good interior pass rusher / run stopper. Really, really solid. Phenomenal athlete as well. Did a ton at the Combine, which is why his stock moved up. And I'm going with D-line over tackle because I think they could give Trevor Penning at least maybe one more year. Sometimes tackles break out in their third year. He is a little bit older, though, so I doubt it. But maybe next year you could target tackle because Ryan Ramczyk, their star tackle, has kind of flirted with retirement. So I could see them definitely going tackle next year, or it could be right here in this pick. But for the mock draft's sake, in terms of sticking with one player, we're going to go with Byron Murphy. Then the Colts. This is not my second best corner in the draft, but I think he's very worthy of being taken here, and it's only because the Colts love just athleticism and freaks like that. And we're going to go with Nate Wiggins, one of the fastest corners, insanely athletic with his speed. He's not the biggest guy, so not like this like height, weight, speed freak, but the speed and relative height, yeah, he's got that for sure. Apparently, he had some bad interviews at the Combine, so I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it dropped his stock a little bit lower, which to start the year, I think he was in contention for like CB1, but I think there's maybe 3, maybe even 4 cornerbacks that might be above him, at least on my board. But I think if it's not Wiggins, it could be Arnold, and I think cornerback is probably the pick here because they need an outside cornerback. They did just pay Kenny Moore, but he's a slot guy. They need someone on the outside, and both Arnold and Wiggins could do that. But again, mock draft sake, we'll stick with Wiggins here. And then Seattle, also kind of a weird pick, interesting spot, but we're going to go with tackle Troy Fautanu out of Washington, keep him in the state. They lost a good amount of interior pieces on their O-line. This could also be an edge rusher as well, but I think they, could potentially move Fautanu on the interior of their offensive line, which they lost a good amount of. They could also move him on the outside. He's played both. He's fit a little bit more. He'd fit a little better as a guard. His arms are not as long as you would like, but he's a very capable tackle. His stock has just slowly moved up the entire time. Had good interviews, had good combine. Tape looks good. He's just going to be a good player, so might as well take him if you're Seattle. You need good players on the team trying to relatively contend, at least get back to the playoffs. So, boom, go get your offensive line improved. And then at 17, I think the Jags would just be so giddy if he was here, and that is Terrion Arnold. Phenomenal pick for them. Also in contention for the best corner in the draft. Arguably had the best year of any cornerback that's, in contention for the first round this year. He can play on the slot. He can play on the outside. Isn't afraid to tackle. Great production. Very good athlete. Even played safety as well. Just going to be an awesome player. Love the pick for Jacksonville. And then the Bengals, similar to the Jets, number one, just need or focus. Please protect your quarterback. He's a stud. Please do not let him get injured. So they need to go ahead and take a tackle here. Between Olu and J.C. Latham, I'm going to go J.C. Latham only because he is a right tackle, and their left tackle right now is Orlando Brown, and Orlando Brown has only played left tackle his entire career. So you could move them, but why not have the guy who actually plays the position go ahead and move over? So we're going to have J.C. Latham go to the Bengals. And then the Rams at 19 could also go in a number of different positions. This could be corner, but I'm going to go with edge rusher, and I'm going to go with a very risky pick, but one that if the Rams hit on, it could be insane, and that is Laiatu Latu from UCLA. Similar to Jordan Phillips when he was coming out, who went to Miami, who has been very good so far. He had to medically retire, but Latu, his past year or two, has been arguably the best pass rusher in the country. His PFF grade is insane 2 years in a row. And again, very risky because of the injury history, and you don't know if his career might end sooner rather than later, which is very scary. But it could work out. We've seen players that have injury history come to the NFL, and they just miraculously don't have any issues. And Phillips 2 years ago had the same thing, and he's been very good. He's been a little bit banged up this past year, but when he's played, he's been awesome, and he's played more than you would think. So this could be corner. I see that, but here with Latu on the board, we're going to go with him, and if he works out, that would be insane for him to take over alongside Aaron Donald and maybe be the next insane pass rusher for the team. Then the Steelers, they also made a good amount of moves. This could be receiver with them making a trade, trading Dante Johnson to the Panthers, which is my favorite team, which we totally won that trade, by the way. Made a lot of moves that are kind of interesting. I'll go over them in a different episode, but that one was very, very good. The other ones weren't bad either. I don't think they're bad. It's a good foundation piece for Carolina, but very good getting Dante Johnson for Dante Jackson. So maybe it's a receiver here, but they literally don't have a center on roster, and this is just a plug-and-play, going to be immediate starter, very good player, Jackson Powers Johnson. Boom. Only thing about him is his arm length is small, even for a center, but if you're playing center, it's not really that big of a deal, because that's why you're at the center position. So I think it's not going to be an issue. Stud, great pick, going to play immediately, protect on the interior, Najee Harris. Is not the greatest running back, but he likes to run down the middle a ton, and Powers Johnson is going to be a phenomenal guy to run behind. So, very good pick there. Miami had a ton of change this offseason. Some good, I'd say. Some maybe not so good. But with this pick, could be tackle, could be a number of different positions. Not really any skills positions I'm thinking of. But we are going to actually go on the defensive interior and go Drazon Newton from Illinois. Very good pass rusher on the inside. Could be tackle, but Austin Jackson that they drafted a few years ago did improve last year, so you could give him another year. And they literally only have Zach Seiler, defensive interior, as like their starting defensive tackle. So why not go ahead and get Newton here? He fell a little bit just due to his athleticism. They said he wasn't as athletic as they thought, but still very much worth a first-round pick and in the 20s. So, hey, it fits perfectly. Why not do it? Miami, go ahead and get a defensive lineman there. The Eagles also made a ton of moves in free agency, obviously stealing Saquon and moving a lot of other pieces around. I really like their offseason this year, but one thing that they could improve on is secondary, and luckily for them, again, due to injuries, Cooper DeJean has fallen, and this would be a perfect pick for the Eagles. They can move around to slot corner, outside. Maybe they prefer to get an outside corner, which in that case they would probably trade down, because there is a linebacker I think that you could take here, but I don't think a lot of people would think it'd be necessarily worth it, or the value wouldn't be there. And if corners go as high as we're saying, maybe you want to get a different guy, but DeJean can still play on the outside. His athleticism is very, very good, especially, I mean, when you watch him, you could just see it. Boom. Okay, he's an awesome athlete. You don't have to go to the combine, which he didn't go to the combine, by the way. But he doesn't have to go to the combine to prove he's a good athlete. He just doesn't. Tape shows it all. He can move around everywhere. Great tacklers, not afraid to tackle. They just need help on the secondary. And with DeJean falling, I think this is good for them to scoop him up here. Then at 23 with the Texans, could also be defense, like an edge rusher or maybe an early linebacker here as well. But I'm going to go with the best player on the board and a position that I think they could need, and that is tackle. So we're going to go ahead and pick up Olu Fashanu. He was rated very high going into the year, kind of fell off a little bit. Is very young, not super raw, but a little bit probably more raw than these other guys like Latham. But with him being very young, I think it really fits with the team because the whole Texans team, at least the core, is very young. So he could go ahead and build with them. And I think it might be the same, if not better, than maybe some of the O-line they had last year. Obviously, aside from Laremy Tunsil. So very good pick there. And he could maybe take over for Tunsil / start alongside him. Number 24, Cowboys didn't have a very active offseason. But I think looking at their team, they did lose a good amount of their, kind of stalwarts at O-linemen. So we're going to go ahead and go tackle as well. And this one's going to be Amarius Mims from Georgia. Just very huge, insanely huge dude. Mims is very raw, however. He showed a ton of promise, but he's very raw. But I would say if I were to pick one or two teams in terms of, hey, we'll give you an O-lineman, can you develop them? It's the Eagles, obviously, and then probably the Cowboys, because they've done a very good job picking and developing a lot of guys that some we thought were going to be good, some we were like, hey, they need some work, and boom, they came out of the gate doing very good. So I think go ahead and get the slightly more raw guy, because based on your history, you could develop him to reach his potential. So Cowboys, it's not the flashy pick, but hey, you build your, core of your team a good amount from the inside out. Obviously, quarterback needs to be there as well, which Dak, if he could make, if he's not that far off, obviously, from NFC quarterbacks. Could he make a Super Bowl? Yeah, but, we'll get to that conversation come our quarterback rankings that we always do, but that's neither here nor there. Go ahead, get O-line. You need it. Good pick. Packers made a good amount of moves as well, but I think with them losing some interior offensive linemen, I know it says tackle here, but they're also going to take an O-lineman in Graham Barton, who will probably play center / guard. He'll move on the interior. They lost 2 interior pieces. They still have Elton Jenkins, but they drafted a tackle a few years ago that's going to replace David Bakhtiari, which David Bakhtiari has just never been able to play as good as he's been when he's on the field. But go ahead, get some O-linemen. Jordan Love looked very good at the second half of last year. A lot of the weapons that they drafted last year actually looked pretty solid as well later in the draft. So defense, you could also look to upgrade, but they signed a good amount of players on defense. So I think this works out. Go ahead and get Graham Barton here. Going to be on the interior. The Bucks, this is a weird team to pick. I went back and forth with a lot of players, but I think it's like, hey, you lost Shaq Barrett. Just go get the best edge rusher, best player left on the board, and that's Jared Verse. Just, again, similar to the Texans pick Dallas Turner. Just very good pass rusher. He's not on the same level as Turner, but I think he would be a very good replacement for Shaq Barrett. Just younger, resets the clock. Pretty simple plug and play there. Then the Cardinals. Cardinals are weird because they have a ton of needs. Obviously, they could pick a guy here and put him in, but, it might be better for them to get more picks than to pick this, pick here. Which, is this trade going to happen? Odds are going to say rather no than yes, but hey, it's a mock draft. It's relatively possible. Why not go ahead and do it? And there is one player that I see left here that I think is definitely worthy of being a first-round pick. A later first-round pick, but worthy. and that is Michael Penix Jr. And we're going to have a team trade up. It's not a team that has a first-round pick, but a team that has a quarterback for the last 2 years at least, has been good, but is older, and I don't think they're going to want to pay him a ton of money when his contract is up in the next. I think they have a get out. I think he has 1 year left on his deal, or maybe 2, but they are able to get out of his contract after the second year. And that team doesn't have a super high second-round pick, but they're going to pair a lot of other picks to go ahead and trade up. And that is going to be the Seattle Seahawks. I'm having them trade up. They're going to give up a third-round pick this year, a second next year, and also a third next year, including, I had it here, young safety, Kobe Bryant, along with maybe they could give up a sixth as well for the 27th pick. Somewhere around there in terms of that value is what they're going to be doing. And they are going to trade up to grab their hopeful next franchise quarterback. Now, Michael Penix, some people obviously have him way higher. They say he's going to be the next Lamar Jackson, blah, blah, blah. There's a reason he's going lower. There's a reason. And I agree with those reasons. He, is not super mobile, played with a ton of amazing talent. His deep ball is amazing. His arm strength is awesome, but was very limited under pressure, avoided throwing over the middle. Injury concerns are very real. He had 4 years in a row where he was hurt. He's an older prospect, not super big in terms of his size. But when it comes down to it, his ball placement is amazing, especially deep, and he has a very huge arm. And I think with stud wide receivers in Seattle, after maybe a year, maybe he doesn't sit the whole time. I think with him being an older prospect, the most you'd not want him playing would be 1 year. But if he comes in and starts as a 24, 25-year-old next year with maybe Geno, if he has 1 year left or something like that, I think this wouldn't really be too bad of a pick because I think he could definitely be a good quarterback. Again, he's an older prospect, but Seattle is not looking to draft high anytime soon, so might as well go out and say, hey, there's this first-round caliber quarterback. We like him. I know I just had Seattle picking 2 Washington players, which kind of works out. But, I think this would be very interesting. I don't know a ton of teams left that would want to take him. There's a few that you could maybe see, but there's not a starting job immediately where we're like, hey, we're giving Michael Penix the job. Unless maybe a team above like Denver or, Minnesota. Unless one of those two go ahead and pick him, I don't really see a future starting job next year for him. It'd have to be a quarterback that maybe has 1 year left. Maybe he goes in the second round, but I do think a team would trade up in the first just to take advantage of having the 5th-year option for him. Then going to the Bills, a player that is probably going to go higher than this, at least I think, but it just makes perfect sense here. Why not? Brian Thomas Jr., very good receiver. He's relatively close to the ones up there. I don't think he's on the same level, but he's still very, very good. They just lost Gabe Davis, but Thomas, I think, can be better than Gabe Davis. Great deep threat with Allen's arm talent. Just perfect. Big, pure play wide receiver. The Lions could also maybe be a trade down situation, but we're going to have them. They did address this in free agency a good amount, and they traded for Carlton Davis, but we're still going to have them take a corner, and that is going to be Kool-Aid McKinstry. Very, very smooth. Very good length. His speed is a question, but he's not alone with the addition of Carlton Davis, and it's not like they're going to be targeting him a crazy amount. He might get hit on occasionally on the deep ball, but he might help you with, a very nice deflection on third down or pick six the next play. So I think he's a first-round caliber corner, and my team, at least the Panthers, I'd be cool taking him if he falls there as well. Number 30, with the Ravens, they have a few places they could look at, again, corner. But when you look at their receiver room, it's Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and that's all the solidified pieces. So why not go ahead and get the next best receiver on the board, in my opinion, and that is Ladd McConkey. I think he's just the safest wide receiver prospect in this draft. You already have, he's not a guy that's like a jump ball, go up and get it. That's Bateman. He's not some super big, fast deep threat. That's Zay Flowers. he's just a guy that gets open, catches the ball, and is super, super reliable. And I think that would be something that the Ravens would really covet. Mark Andrews is that player at tight end, and he got injured. And obviously, they still succeeded. But I think sometimes with Lamar, maybe it helps to just have a guy like, hey, on third down, slant, boom, first down. Like, hey, and he's bigger than you would think. He's not very small, and he's relatively fast as well for, him not being the super deep threat. So it's not like he's very limited slot receiver. He's very capable of also playing on the outside. So I think this would be an awesome pick for Baltimore. I love Ladd McConkey in this draft. San Francisco could also look at a few places, but I'm going to have them going Tyler Guyton. He's not the most refined tackle, but again, is developmental, and I think with the 49ers, that can work for them. He doesn't have to come in and start right away. And with Williams being very old, they don't really have a real, plan behind him. So Guyton could maybe after a year or two, probably 1 year, come in and take over for Williams. Maybe if he retires in the next year or two. If they want someone else to maybe fill the void of players that maybe they lost, they did sign Eric Kendricks, so that could maybe just say, hey, we're going to do that, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Peyton Wilson could go there. Or maybe if you want to get edge rusher, you could go ahead and get Chop Robinson. That'd be a good pick. But here we're going to go Tyler Guyton. And then the Chiefs, with the last pick in the first round, go ahead and get the fastest receiver of all time, at least in terms of the combine, Xavier Worthy. Now, Xavier Worthy, is he a first-round pick just because of his speed? That's the thing that propelled him. But when you look at other super speed freaks, he's not just like, hey, he's the next John Ross. Like, he's a much more refined route runner. He's bigger. His hands are still not phenomenal, and that's why he wasn't a first-round pick. And I wouldn't be surprised if maybe earlier on he wasn't as good. He can also move in the slot and on the outside, so he's not just stuck to one position. So maybe it's a rocky start in the beginning, but in Kansas City fashion, don't be surprised if towards the end of the year he's killing it and it's Tyreek Hill all over again. Not saying he will be Tyreek Hill, but on occasion the plays that Tyreek Hill did in terms of all these open deep balls that are there, with Andy Reid scheming it up, boom, Xavier Worthy down there. Towards the end, when it matters, the Chiefs always get it together, and maybe that's what happens this season. So this is the first official Stoneheart Sports mock draft. I will be doing another mock draft with my good friend Mathis. He has a channel, Mathis NFL. It's way bigger. He's been doing it for a long time. So I'll still have all my stuff on my little podcast that I do. Again, I apologize if the quality's not amazing. I'm trying to figure everything out with getting videos and stuff, but just want to get this video out there. We'll have another video and podcast about March Madness. I love March Madness. It's one of my favorite things. This channel is focused on basketball and football mainly. Football will have a lot of off-season content, but March Madness is coming up. Going to do an episode on that. But for now, that'll do it for this mock draft. Here, you can go take a look, pause wherever you need to on what your favorite team picked. And that'll do it for me. So everyone stay smart, stay sharp, and I will see you guys later. Peace.